Hey everyone, this is Quentin Figueroa with crowdfreedom.com, and the topic for today's video is Antarctica a possibility for a free society? So yes, Antarctica, way down south at the South Pole, that continent that pretty much nobody is on right now. So we hear about Elon Musk and SpaceX wanting to take a mission to Mars, right? And colonizing Mars or this type of thing on Mars is kind of a science fiction, far-fetched type thing. But with it kind of becoming a possibility of a reality or somebody actually wanting to accomplish that, it makes you kind of think about other locations, or at least it makes me think about Antarctica and places like that. Because in a lot of ways, Antarctica is very similar to Mars. It's very remote, it's hard to get there. There's a few people living in Antarctica, but pretty much nobody. There's no real cities or civilizations there, just like Mars. It's hard to live there. The atmosphere on Mars is worse than, I guess, the atmosphere on Antarctica, but there's similarities, right? It's super cold on Antarctica. Mars has a lot of cold areas and things like this. It's very hard to survive. It's not like living in California or, the tropics or someplace and just having food that you can easily grow and that kind of thing. So if Mars is perhaps a possibility, is Antarctica. So let's explore Antarctica. So right now, Antarctica does have some unclaimed land, right? So it's a huge continent and not a lot of people use it or want to be there, so as you would expect, it's kind of the least colonized place. And you would think that there's no governments there or that it's completely open to anybody since nobody's there, but that's not fully true. There's what's called the Antarctic Treaty System, which is a treaty between, I think, like 52 countries or something, where it's basically saying that Antarctica is to be used for scientific purposes and not to have military activity there. So that's pretty much what that treaty is stating, and that kind of governs how Antarctica should be used. But if you look at maps that show kind of the allocation of who owns what in Antarctica, there is a place called Murray Bird Land, and that is unclaimed territory that nobody actually owns right now. So you have different countries like Norway, America, Great Britain and stuff that own kind of different parts of it, but that part is unclaimed. And naturally, it's like one of the worst territories, and it's unclaimed kind of for a reason. But still, it's unclaimed. So is something like that workable? Could a free society claim it and start there and kind of try to build a free society there without government? So it comes down to the costs and benefits, right? So is it worth it? Would it even be viable? Could you scale it? That kind of thing. So you have to kind of start looking at that. So let's look at a few of these things. The most obvious being the climate, the temperature. Because obviously Antarctica is really freaking cold. It's colder in Antarctica than it is in the North Pole. And the North Pole is really cold. So if you go to Antarctica, the average temperature there is negative 50 degrees Fahrenheit. That's the average temperature. They've had temperatures recorded there as low as negative 89 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's really cold in Antarctica. And it gets a little bit warmer as you go towards the coast, right? So there's parts of Antarctica, if you go to South America, the very tip of South America at the bottom, if you go a little bit lower, that's where you hit kind of the tip of Antarctica. And in that area, it can be a bit warmer. And kind of in the summertime, when there's sun out, it can be up to like 40 degrees or so Fahrenheit, which isn't too bad. And then obviously it gets lower as the seasons change. And speaking of the seasons, it doesn't work the way most of the world works with seasons. You have 6 months of straight sunlight, and then you have 6 months of darkness, right? Because the sun is oscillating up and down between North Pole and South Pole. So when you have the sun down here, you have a long time of daylight. So you have a 6-month day, and then when the sun changes to the North Pole, you have a 6-month night in Antarctica. So that is really weird, kind of. It's not weird, but it's something people aren't used to. And that's something to think about. And obviously, when the daylight's there, it's warmer, and that is when majority of people are there. And when it gets cooler, people leave Antarctica and get out of there because it's really cold, as if it wasn't already cold with the sun. So yeah, the way the days work and the temperature is something to think about. And in line with that, so I think right now there's like 5,000 or so people that are kind of there in and out of Antarctica, and they're all scientist type people. They're not there living there like, this place is awesome, I want to live here. They're there doing research. They're at a station. They get supplies provided for them from their nations and different governments. So it's not like a self-sustaining thing at all right now. And the people who live there, they hang out there usually for 6 months when there's sunlight. And then when there's no more sunlight, they get out of there and say, this place sucks, I'm going home. Very few people do stay. I think the longest somebody's been there is like 2 years. But most people stay there when there's sunlight and then they leave. And getting there, as far as I know, they get there by boat. It takes about 5 days to get there, just to get there, and then 5 days to get out. So it's very remote and hard to get there, and it's not something that's easily done. So you're still dealing with kind of extreme conditions, and it's not like a normal location, obviously. So then what about food? Okay, so I think, as most people know, penguins live on Antarctica. They're like one of the only animals there. And penguins, of course, for them to live there, they have to eat something. So what do? They eat seafood. So they hang out in the coastal areas of Antarctica, and they eat seafood, and they live off that. So if you were to want to kind of live in Antarctica in a self-sustainable way without any kind of other entity providing you food or that kind of thing, you're pretty much stuck with penguins to eat, which probably going to piss a lot of people off. You could get seafood, which, okay, go for it. That's, people do it. That's probably really hard to do still. I mean, I know catching seafood in Alaska is pretty tough. I think Antarctica is even tougher, but I don't know. That's tough, but it's an option. And then, I don't know, you have kind of more technological things. Like if you've seen the movie The Martian, because we are talking somewhat about Mars, you could create kind of like a greenhouse, or kind of create your own artificial place to grow plants and that kind of thing, and maybe something like that could work. But it's still very kind of technological driven, and it's still very tough and hard to do. You can't just go out, set up a farm, start growing things. You can't have livestock. It's too tough. The climate's not there for that. So it's really tough. And yeah, it makes you think. So even if we were to go to Mars and do that kind of thing, it's not like, at least I don't think, the people on Mars are going to live there off the land. They're going to have, so if say SpaceX goes there, SpaceX is going to have to provide resources for the people living on Mars. And they're going to have more of just a station there where they're living and consuming resources that they got from Earth, right? But they're not going to be creating resources on Mars. Or if they are, it's not going to be to the degree that they can sustain an actual population. This is as far as I know. Maybe I'm wrong. And if I'm wrong, that's a good thing for Antarctica. But I don't think it's that way. I think it's more they're bringing stuff with them with the hopes of kind of staying there, but then coming back. I don't think they can actually survive and self-sustain there. And if that's the case, Antarctica kind of faces these same consequences where it's hard to self-sustain there. And if you're just there to kind of survive, but you're not actually being able to scale into something, you're not able to really enjoy your life, you're just sitting there like in the cold saying this sucks, and you can't go out and ride a bike or run or do a lot of stuff. I mean, it's so cold, there's no real climate to do anything. What are you going to do but just sit there inside and kind of do nothing? Which is okay for a while, but eventually, and if you want more people there, you just can't have that. And that's why when I kind of look more at this stuff, it makes me start to wonder, well then maybe actually seasteading could make more sense. Because seasteading, at least with seasteading, you're in a good climate, right? You can be pretty much anywhere where there's an ocean. You get more closer to the equator. You can have land, you can grow things, you can actually farm, you can go outside and do stuff. You actually have a nice climate, which is like kind of a core part of an enjoyable life, right? You don't want to live where it's freaking negative 50 degrees on average. You want to go out in the sun and have a good time and be able to go swimming or running or whatever. So yeah, when I think about Antarctica seriously, because I just don't think it makes sense, because I don't think you're getting really anywhere with it. It's way too extreme. And if you are going to go for something extreme, why not cough up $20 or $30 million and go for a seastead rather than cough up who knows what? It's probably it's be a lot less money to do Antarctica, but the risk, there's so many freaking unknowns that you don't know about. Or at least with a seastead, there's unknowns, but there's a lot of knowns, and the only real challenge with a seastead is getting the money and coming up with a way to make it profitable, or basically to make it profitable and to make it work and to get the money. That's the hard part. And at least that isn't as hard as trying to survive technically in a self-sustainable way on Antarctica. That to me is ridiculous. But living on a seastead is not as ridiculous. That you can do that. You can live on that. People already go on cruise ships all the time and live there, and you could create lots of different things on there. You could you could farm on there. You could do that. That makes sense. That's not even that confusing. So yeah, when I think about Antarctica, I think costs and benefits wise, lots of costs, not a lot of benefits. And then I think, well, seasteading to me seems kind of crazy, but seasteading seems less crazy than Antarctica. So it's like, if seasteading is less crazy, well, then let's just do that. And then of course, even seasteading has lots of challenges, but you could also kind of go more like the alternative, let's just buy land or negotiate some type of land deal with an existing government, which is another option, which I think also makes sense. And that is still better than Antarctica also. I'd rather just negotiate with some country in South America or Asia or somewhere like that and figure out how to get like 100 square miles of territory to do a society and kind of build that way, and you could at least farm and have good climate and that kind of stuff, rather than get Antarctica for free and just sit there like an idiot screwed. So that's my thoughts. And also to add to that, I'd rather live in America as it is right now, paying like half of my money in taxes, than living in Antarctica completely free. So I'd still rather be under a government in America than completely free in Antarctica. So it just doesn't, and if that's the case for me, I'm sure like most people are that way, because I am not a big fan of government. And if I'd still rather be with government in America than Antarctica with no government, I think a lot of people would feel the same way. So that is my take on Antarctica. So hopefully that gives you some insight. And if you ever considered it, like I have, there you go. Now you kind of have some info to go off, and hopefully that's helpful. Thanks everyone. Have a good day.